Hello and good evening and welcome everyone to the report launch event organized by Asia Center in partnership with Connects Us. In this event, we will be launching a report titled Internet Freedoms in Malaysia, Regulating Online Discourse on Race, Religion and Royalty, produced in partnership with the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law or ICNL. My name is Lina Sakina Salim, the Center Coordinator with Asia Center Malaysia, and I will be your Master of Ceremony this evening. As we wait for our guests to stream into the room, I would like to inform you that our event will officially begin soon, and we will also be starting the FB Live shortly. So you can catch this webinar live on our event page. Therefore, please share the FB link with your networks. Let me now remind you of our Zoom meeting guidelines. Participants will have their microphones muted and the videos turned off throughout the session. For questions, please send them via the Zoom Q&A function. Alternatively, you may also use the chat box to communicate your questions to us. And lastly, please keep a lookout of the chat box as updates from the Asia Center team will be placed in the chat box. So it is now 8 p.m. So I will now begin the session by calling upon Dr. James Gomez, the Regional Director of Asia Center, to introduce Asia Center and present his opening remarks.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us here today. My name is James Gomez. I'm very pleased that we could bring this report that we produced in partnership with the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law, and this event is co-organized by Connects Us, which is part of Search Common Ground. Now, a little bit about the Asia Center, and that too very briefly. Asia Center is best understood as a civil society research institute, is accredited with the United Nations Economic and Social Council and has a consultative status with it. We do three things. We undertake evidence-based research, which is about 50 to 60% of our work. We do reports, baseline studies, program evaluation, and such. Then we organize about 30% of our work is around capacity building, training, and convening events. And last but not least, we undertake advocacy by submitting submissions to the various human rights mechanisms in the UN, and also writing to the media, as well as producing content for digital media. Before we proceed for this evening, I also want to highlight our flagship event that we curate every year, and this is the 8th year. It's always around the theme related to democracy and human rights, and this year is on democracy and elections in Asia. The event will take place in Bangkok on the 23rd to 25th August. It's an on-site event. It's convened through partnerships. So if you are interested, please reach out to us. So that's my opening remark and a brief introduction of the Asia Center. And back to you, Lina.
All right, thank you, Dr. Gomez, for the introduction. Let's get the ball rolling with the first part of the session, which is a poll activity. So if I can get everyone in Zoom, the participants and also the speakers, to please give a few seconds of your time and answer this poll. Question is, in your opinion, to what extent are the 3 Rs affecting the rights of minorities in Malaysia? And the options are: number 1, most extensively; number 2, extensively; number 3, moderately; and number 4, not at all. So please take a few seconds of your time to key in what do you think about how the 3 Rs, mainly race, religion, and royalty, is affecting the rights of minorities in this country. So while we wait for everyone to finish their answering of the poll, let me now bring your attention to the next part, which is to watch the infographic video of the report. So we have created an infographic video which provides an overview of what will be presented in the report itself. So if the team can share the video, please. Race, religion, and royalty, known as the 3 Rs,
strongly shape Malaysia's socio-political landscape. Political parties use different 3Rs narrative to gain political support. Those supporting the 3Rs traditional interpretation use an ecosystem of laws to protect the special position of the Malays, Islam, and the monarchy. But with the internet, a progressive 3Rs narrative promoting multiculturalism and social justice gained strength. As a result, internet policing increased to censor progressive online content related to the 3Rs. To negate the progressive interpretation, ultra-nationalist groups emerged to promote their far-right interpretation of the 3Rs. Malaysia is at political crossroads. The new unity government has reaffirmed the centrality of the 3Rs, and consequently, internet freedoms are not expected to improve. Asia Centre and the International Centre for Not-for-Profit Law have some recommendations. To the Malaysian government, amend, review and repeal laws that threaten freedom of expression online. To Suhakam and NGOs, monitor and document human rights violations online. To tech companies, increase transparency in dealing with government requests to remove online content. Read these and other recommendations in our newest report, Internet Freedoms in Malaysia, Regulating Online Discourse on Race, Religion and Royalty. Download it from Asia Centre's website. At Asia Centre, we speak up for human rights.
All right, so you have seen the video, you have gotten an idea of what the report is about. So let us now look at the results of the poll. And with that, I will now call upon Dr. James Gomez to discuss the poll findings and deliver the presentations afterwards. So, Dr. Gomez, please.
Thank you very much. A quick look at the poll's comments from you actually reflect opinions across the region. And when I say the region, Southeast Asia, we have done other studies that looked at Southeast Asia in particular, including some country studies covering Myanmar, Indonesia, and Singapore as well. In most cases, the intersectionality between ethnicity and religion saw countries in which the majority held political power saw minority communities disadvantaged. So that is also what we see in terms of your opinion and also what we found out in the report. So here's the report. We provide the context, an overview of national laws in Malaysia, its impact on internet freedoms, some key recommendations and conclusions, all of which was neatly summarized in the short video. I'm just going to elaborate slightly on some of these points. So moving on to the next slide. We see essentially three types of 3Rs. So if we look towards Malaysian political evolution, starting from the time when the country, pushed for independence away from colonial rule, the 3Rs where it promoted race, religion, royalty was literally to take back what the community felt it had lost during the colonial era. So the centrality of the Malay community later on expanded to include the indigenous community, religion where Islam was put forward as a religious marker, but also aligned with the Malay race, and then of course royalty, the monarchy, the institution. So for about next 60 years, you'll find an ecosystem of laws was set into place to preserve this narrative, and it was protected pretty fairly. But as the political fortune shifted, and when Anwar was sacked from UMNO, and it seems these days many have been sacked from UMNO, that led to his ability to articulate something that was already on the ground, because the minority communities were also, asking for a more equitable representation from their point of view in the Malaysian political social system. So in that sense, without rejecting the 3 Rs, weaved into it this notion of multiculturalism and also social justice. And this caught flavor, and we see that first the Pakatan Rakyat and then later Pakatan Harapan were able to muster a fair bit of support. And I'm, of course, really simplifying this, but just to show that there was the difference between the traditional 3R and a progressive 3R. Now, this is where it gets interesting, and it's not unique to Malaysia. As the internet sort of weakens the traditional elite, and we can see it in Thailand, in Singapore, in Malaysia, as well as in Cambodia. As the ruling power force, whether it's a military regime or a single party, as it wanes, you will see the rise of ultra-nationalists or right-wing groups who become the defenders of the status quo. They do things that the waning ruling regimes can't really do. So they push to a far-right narrative, and we see that over the course of Malaysian political evolution, this far-right discourse was there, but with the internet, it was able to spread and come to the surface more strongly. And over the last 2 elections, this has strengthened, and we've seen that become a political force in the last elections. So all of this has happened on the back of the changing internet landscape in Malaysia. Those of us who are familiar with Malaysia know this well, and it's one of the fastest growing internet social media penetration and usage in the world. So it's no wonder that you get that kind of amplification there. So moving on to the next slide. I want to say that part of the challenge is also, the lack of adherence to international human rights standards. It's an ideal, but still it's good to flag that in countries, where you have these issues, often at times, they have not rectified key provisions, and in this case, ICCPR and ISET have not been ratified, and we know the challenges with ISET in Malaysia. So apart from Malaysia, Myanmar is another country. Singapore, interestingly, did ratify the ISET, but not the ICCPR. And so similarly in Brunei. That having been said, even though you have countries like Indonesia that have rectified it, Philippines and Thailand, but you will see similarly there will be pockets of tension that are, along the intersectionality between religion and ethnicity. Next, please. So you'll find that, and I'm going to just summarize this briefly. The Constitution, all constitutions across the region provide for, religious freedom. However, there are clauses there that negate it. Pre-internet era, you had the Penal Code, Sedition Act, to some extent, the Evidence Act, Official Secret Acts that put a lid on these things, and this is what UMNO used in the last 60 years for its traditional narrative. Then, as the internet shifted, this is where it becomes a bit nebulous. In the later part of the years, UMNO used it also to try to keep its narrative, but lost ground to PKR or PRPH as the election cycle shifted towards contemporary times. But at the same time, on the flip side, you will see that the right-wing factions also rode on the underbelly of having access to the internet. So in short, our recommendations are that, and next slide, please. Before I go that, so as far as internet freedoms are concerned, often websites are blocked, content are removed. individuals, organizations, especially minority religious groups, are persecuted. And then, of course, you have this phenomenon of the rise of nationalist groups. I want to say, again, this is a pattern across the region. This report just confirms the Malaysian case. So let's have a quick dive into the ultra-nationalist group. Who are they? They can be, state actors, state leaders. They can also be non-state actors such as preachers, religious leaders, influencers, members of NGOs, opinion leaders, radical extremists. So the range is quite a lot. What do? They espouse the supremacy of the 3R in terms of right-wing articulation or right-wing doctrine, but also they use it to push other people off the net so they can, dominate the narrative. How they do it, they monitor, they patrol and monitor the online space, dox individuals, use hate speech and expose people. In the Malaysian case, very popular to file police complaints. So most of the time, those who have opinions about religious views often, fear having a police complaint filed against them, and then getting caught up with the whole investigation and litigation process. Is it something new? Not. It's always been there, but I think the internet just helped amplify it. And the latest manifestation we saw was in the last election, and I'm expecting in the next few months, as we run up to the state elections, we'll see more of it. In what form is not clear, but there are already some signs. Next, please. So in short, our recommendations are fairly generic, but of course, also unique to Malaysia, and they are listed in detail in our report. But on short, we often ask governments to review the laws, parliamentarians to kind of champion it, but also use the parliament as a site where they can sort of, responsibly also push for a safe space where such issues can be discussed. The National Human Rights Institution should also play its role as an oversight mechanism. We know that there are some challenges for this in the context. NGOs can monitor these companies, these developments, and tech companies also have their part. But as a wrap up, I just want to say that the one phenomenon to keep in mind in Malaysia, especially in the context of the post-election, is many of this. See, when the right-wing movement comes up, and again, not unique to Malaysia, they infiltrate, and that's part of their strategy. So they infiltrate all the organs of the state. They try, because that's the strategy. So if you say Suhakam, are they there? If you talk about government agencies, are they there? So when you dissect a particular country and you say you have ultra-nationalists or right-wing groups, you also want to reflect upon where exactly are they embedded, because they are everywhere, because that's the strategy, and that's why it's difficult and challenging. So I leave it here, and I look forward to the comments from my colleagues who are here on the panel. Thank you very much, Dina, and it's back to you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. James, for providing us with the main findings of the report. Let us now move to the next segment of the event, when we are able to get to know what are the opinions of our discussants regarding their views on the report. So I will now call upon the first speaker or discussant. It is Ms. Tham. So Ms. Tham is an independent researcher based in KL, Malaysia. In 2022, she led the development of Tracker Benci, an AI prototype which tracks online hate speech in the Malaysian context. So Ms. Javan, the stage is yours for the next 5 minutes.
Okay. Is my audio and video all right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Hi everyone. As mentioned, I'm Vern. Currently an independent researcher, and I used to work at the center where I looked extensively into what hate speech looks like to Malaysians and what other actors could possibly do about it in terms of managing the problem. So I'll start off with kind of just establishing what I've done. Firstly, in 2020, at the center, we did a study on what I said, responses to Malaysian hate speech samples. And we tried to develop a framework for hate speech categorization and response. Basically, in short, we wanted to see what the rapid plan of action could look like in the Malaysian context. So, next slide, please. Okay, so basically, this is a quick recap. A quick recap of what my research on that looks like. I started. Okay, a quick recap of what my research looked like. We managed to define that Malaysians thought hate speech is the most serious when it involves religious beliefs. And we managed to create certain levels of hate speech where we thought level 3, the most serious ones, should be treated, can be treated through the criminal legal system, and the level 2s and 1s could be dealt with through maybe a national moderator of some sort. So basically, we thought, after doing that, what's the point of distinguishing levels of hate speech if we don't know what it looks like over time? Therefore, Tracker Benchi was born. So coming to Tracker Benchi, my initial goals for it was I wanted it to act as a repository for trends and themes for online hateful content in Malaysia. This was only targeted on Twitter, by the way, because only Twitter had an open access for data. And we also wanted it to be a labor-effective tool to label and categorize what is considered hateful to Malaysians and whether that kind of information would change over time. Next slide, please. Okay. Sorry, give me a moment. Yeah. Okay, so to do so, I had 3 main pillars of my methodology: to dig, to distinguish, and to develop. So basically, first step, we developed a Twitter API, and we looked up nearly 20,000 tweets that contain predetermined hateful terms and phrases that are relevant to the Malaysian context. And these tweets would then form the data set for training our machine learning model. And then we sat down to distinguish that data set. So we had a small team of researchers who classified the tweets as hateful, non-hateful by sentiment, type, and theme. And lastly, to develop, we created that website, as you saw. So next slide, please. These are some of the screenshots of data we got over time. Next slide as well. I'm sorry, next slide, please. Yeah. So very roughly from this slide, you can tell, mostly from our research, online negative stereotypes are most prominent on Malaysian Twitter, at least. And thankfully, violent sentiments or calls to violence are at the minimum. I'm not going to say they don't exist, at the minimum. Next slide, please. Yeah, so quickly, my biggest lessons from developing Tractability together with partners. AI was a great tool to help us do this, but we also found how online hate speech in Malaysia has been trying to find its way around platform algorithms. So that's something to be dealt with. And I think next slide, please. So lastly, I think we need to relook at what hate speech, online hate speech really is in a Malaysian context, and push for criminal sanctions only to be reserved for the most serious, horrible calls to violence, and deal with the lower level ones in the education realm of things. Thank you very much, and that's me.
All right, thank you very much, Javan, for giving us a look into how Tractability is done. And so let me bring the attention to the second speaker. The second speaker is Dr. Syaza Shukri, which is the Assistant Professor of International Islamic University of Malaysia in the Political Science Department. She's also a non-resident research fellow at the European Centre for Populism Studies in Brussels. So can I call upon Dr. Syaza to present? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dina. Good evening, everyone. So I do have a visual, so I hope you'll just bear with what I have to say for the next 5 minutes. So I don't have much to add, in the sense that whatever that Dr. James have presented and talked about is in line with my own findings from my various research that I've done. So that is where that's the angle that I'm taking in terms of my commentary on this report. So one of the things that initially caught my attention when I was reading through the report is that, and it was in the video earlier, that Malaysia is supposedly becoming politically progressive when it comes to these 3R, especially on race and religion. However, in my opinion, I don't see that really happening. In other words, I see that Malaysia is still very much a conservative nation, even under the current Prime Minister, under Anwar Ibrahim. One of the cited example is the fact that he went on national TV right after he was sworn in, and he clarified that his administration would not recognize the LGBTQA community, communism, secularism, and I think was also in the video saying that yes, these things are not going away. So in other words, I feel like the 3R, especially race and religion, the Malaysian government is keeping with the status quo, and the justification is in the name of national stability. In fact, we can even see recently, right, with the retabling of budget 2023, we see at the debate from the opposition side, right, the things that they were asking, like the frequency of the term Bumi Putra, meaning the so-called indigenous people, right, the low frequency of it. They are questioning where are the goodies for the Malays. So again, my point is that the 3R, religion and race specifically, is very much part of Malaysian politics. And for me, this is also exemplified by the multiple Malay parties that we saw sprung up since, what, 6-7 years ago. So when they came into the picture, what happened is that they had to out-Islamize and out-Malay one another, because they're all going after the same pool of voters, right? The Malays. And like I said, from my observation, the Malays are still conservative. So they're going after this conservative community. And it aligns with my research that I did in 2020, when my respondents, majority of my Malay respondents, even though they agreed that the economic well-being especially have improved compared to past generations, they still, in a way, not demand, but they expect the government to continue to protect their identity, specifically Malay Muslim identity, right? I have also argued elsewhere that the rise of this conservative Malay today has to do with this phenomenon where we call popular Islam or pop Islam. So what we are saying is that these people who, in their youth in the 80s and 90s, today, for lack of a better word, they're trying to catch up with their peers, right? They're seeing women in hijab, they're seeing their other friends and family members going to perform the Umrah, the Hajj. So they feel this need to catch up under this idea of popular Islam. So one of the easiest way to do this is politically, to vote for certain parties that claim that by voting them, you will gain salvation, you enter heaven, etc. It's a quick way, a quick fix for them. And this is where I link it back to misinformation and disinformation, fake news that we saw rampant right at the end of last year, where people are talking about the Muslim identities being under threat, etc. But we need to remember, right, in Malaysia, the 3R, specifically the Islam, the Malays, and the monarchy, they are actually protected in the constitution, right? Their special positions are protected, enshrined in the constitution. So it actually doesn't matter who is in Putrajaya. So for me, the real enemy in Malaysia today is not the so-called threats to the Malays and Muslims, but those who are trying to cause this kind of discord in the country. So I realize that my time is running out. So I think my main message is that we're facing the state election in the next few months after June. So what should the government do, right? Because just like Dr. James said, we expect this 3R propaganda will crop up definitely. So I agree that dangerous speech should be met with legal repercussions, and malicious disinformation must be countered effectively by the government, because in a way the state elections is a do or die for the unity government, right? Some have said that if the unity government cannot retain at least 3 states, it will put pressure on them, especially by UMNO members who may not be fully supportive of Anwar as Prime Minister. So it's very important for them to really think of how to counter this fake news and hate speech. But having said that, I also would like to remind everyone that, even when Pakatan Harapan did not use this populist strategy of paying influencers to spread the 3R propaganda on social media, they still won the most votes and most seats. So my point is that there's still appetite, by Malaysian voters for this kind of restrained approach. So the government needs to find this kind of balance and wisdom, because they still need to win over the Malay voters to speak on the 3R, but in a way that doesn't limit the rights of minorities as the poll earlier. So I'll end there. Thank you, Lina.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Syaza, for providing your insights about the conservative Malays, populist Islam, and your forecast for the state election. Now I'll call upon the third speaker, Ms. Dina Zaman. She is the co-founder of Iman Research and also a well-known writer. Up to the floor. And so, Ms. Dina, the floor is yours.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. Can you all hear me clearly? Right, I apologize to everyone. I'm not my best today. I had the flu. But anyway, we'll get straight to the point. I truly enjoyed the 2 speakers, their thoughts, Dr. Javan, soon to be Dr. Javan, Dr. Syaza. And I read the report and I thought, okay, this encapsulates almost everything that we've been discussing for a lot of researchers and those who, the political observers, yeah? So from my end, so Iman does study about why does hate speech, why are people turning more to extremist ideologies, and I wear another hat where I actually study a lot of why do Malays do what they do, and it's been fun, hair-raising, but quite fun, yeah. So in today's case, in today's presentation, right, I think that we're talking about internet freedoms. And while, we need to monitor speech, hate speech, and all that on the internet, on TikTok, and all these various social media platforms, I do feel that we need to be mindful that suppressing speech may do more harm than good. Yeah. This is because one of the things that keeps being repeated again and again in our research, or at least in our conversations with young Malays or young Malaysians also, yeah, is that, they feel that the state has failed them. And again, it's being repeated. The government, we have so many prime ministers, blah, 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 blah. So we turn to the internet, we turn to TikTok, we turn to whichever social media that speaks to us, right? To find the truths that we want. And these truths may not be legitimate, they might not be even factual, but they speak to the core of these people who are looking for that, right? And this is very worrying when you know that some of the things that they believe in or subscribe to, it's not right. Now, let me just, speed up a bit before I go to some of my notes, yeah? At the moment right now, we all, the two speakers talked about the rise of conservatism and the far right, yeah? Populist movements, all these narratives, which are quite frightening. I think in the last, 2 Fridays ago, 1 Friday ago. So the past youth wing in Setiu, Terengganu, right, did this parade. So, okay, we've all got our own theories as to why they did that. But to political scientists who observed this, saying that having such a visual representation of a parade, and yes, perhaps, a lot of us can laugh about the whole thing, it still does give the wrong signal to the casual observer who may think, oh my God, are we turning into Afghanistan? Of course, we're not turning into Afghanistan. But that little parade was enough to actually, make some people have the jitters. There's also the polarizing effect of Anwar Ibrahim. I think with our discussions with Malays around Malaysia, yeah, you see, it's not just about this person's with UMNO or this person is with PAS. I mean, we've heard a lot of things from the heartland who complain about PAS. But you see, what the Malays really want, right, is someone that they can trust. Someone who's not corrupt, someone who is seen as, an observant Muslim, Semayang 5 kali sehari and all that, right? And Anwar is seen as, okay, he's a bit of a strange dark horse here, He's a liberal's darling, even though he's an Islamist. The way he has, campaigned for his position. So a lot of Malays feel, okay, we don't know what to do with them. And possibly that was why they voted for PN. Possibly. I mean, these are the conversations had when we did our election sentiments analysis. Then again, the great big bogeyman, which has been, spoken about since 20 years ago, liberalism. And now it's become even more urgent. As the whole world is still struggling to cope with, this post-COVID pandemic, right? And you see this happening in France, in Europe, in the States, right? And then also in now in Southeast Asia, where you see more far-right movements or far-right supporters supporting, certain ideologies in Indonesia, in Malaysia, and so forth. Liberalism is still seen as the worst bogeyman because, it promotes certain lifestyle. It supports certain kind of thinking, which are considered, anomalies to the person here. And we're not talking about politicians who have their own agendas in spreading certain things. But again, in Malaysia, or let's backtrack to Malaysia a bit, for that Malaysian who's just trying to, I'm just trying to survive here, right? This is very frightening because all this will impact my bread and butter. And I can say that, a lot of people, I'm now on TikTok thanks to our elections, right? And I was just monitoring, the religious the religious doas, right, among the young Malays and older Malays somewhat, right? And what you're looking for more, at least what I am seeing is just looking at how many people are looking. They're looking for doas, prayers for rezeki and jadi kaya. You can laugh about it, but economic worries are at the top of their mind. It's not just about going to Jannah or becoming a good Muslim. Not cari duit to survive. It's very, 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 it's at the top of their mind. So they go to that, and I'm going, okay, so this is what they're looking at. So before I end this, because I know we've got only about 5 minutes, I don't want to say that social media, the internet, right, are demons or anything, I think that if we can actually use it, but the problem is, and if you just give me 1 more minute, the problem is when you talk about think tanks, CSOs, etc., etc. Because of the work we do is so based on funding. You get a fantastic program, and after that it dies. Why? Because we don't have enough money. We can't move on with this. And I actually have some ideas on how perhaps we can reach out with, not just influencers. I don't have much faith in them, but the average Malaysian to say, hey, I think we should be doing this on TikTok, on IG Reels, and I see this. They may not be famous. They may probably have only 1,000, 2,000 friends or followers. But if you tap into that resource, I think we can actually come up to creating a narrative that's very healthy for people. And this is what I discussed with Vern yesterday when we met up. One final thing, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. It's going to be difficult. There's going to be a lot of shouting. But I think we need to do this and be brave enough to listen to, why do you think this way? Why do you do this thing? For us to move on. I don't believe in all these nice little discussions among, I think we need to get angry. And then we can start talking to each other.
All right, thank you so much, Dina. I guess that's a very good point where you highlighted about understanding the voting patterns of the people before, passing judgments about, their decisions and so on. So let's call upon the last speaker that we have online, which is Ms. Wathshlah Naidu. She is the Executive Director for Center for Independent Journalism. So if I can pass the floor to Ms. Wathshlah, please.
Thank you very, very much. And good evening to everyone. Being the last speaker, it's almost like everybody else has said whatever I wanted to say. But I just wanted to kind of emphasize, James started off by saying that, this kinds of divisive, polarizing narratives on the basis of 3R, it's not new, right? What we basically are seeing elements and attempts where it has become politicized and the actors continue to leverage, through fear mongering, right? And for them, it's tested, tried and tested too. It's also becoming, it's really systemic and it's become so institutionalized when you see this, through our laws and policy. The one key element here that that has changed some of these, the way it's being amplified is the fact that the modes and the channels for amplification have become more sophisticated, has become more accessible, across generation, across geographical divides, and so on. Yeah. Now, I was wondering if I could have access to share screen. I just wanted to kind of share a little bit about our experience recently during the 15th general election. And what we basically did was monitor hate speech. We focused a lot in terms of, we had our hypothesis. We knew that going into elections, the kind of narratives that were going to play out would be around 3R. We also knew that there was going to be attacks on the basis of, gender, attacks against particular communities, especially the LGBT communities, refugees, and migrants. On that basis, we actually, Javan, we also looked at Tracker Benci, and then we kind of developed our own severity scale, looking at harmful and hate speech. You could actually check out our website, which gives more information. And we decided to look at 4 different platforms: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. And we also focused on monitoring specific actors, especially politicians, political parties, media, some key opinion leaders, and critical government agencies, which we know have been, been used to spread certain narratives. And of course, we we kind of learned a lot through these process, and feel free to kind of look through this findings. But what I also wanted to kind of share is what we realized throughout these process is, again, it's not new. It's just, it's becoming so rampant that we need to figure out how to deal with this. One thing that we noted was that obviously the information ecosystem itself has changed. It has evolved to so much that our main source of information is not necessarily just the government, right? Or the media, for that matter, traditional media, be it print, broadcast, digital. It's, you know, it's gone into different social media platforms, messaging apps, and so on. Yeah. And at the same time, we note that the actors have also changed. It's not just the politicians who weaponized it, but, you know, politicians are beginning to use influencers. You know, there's suddenly key opinion leaders who are coming up. I mean, during the 15th general election, we saw how severe some of these videos that were being released by influencers. I mean, we saw Jamal Abdullah, we saw Zul Huzaimi's shocking videos and shocking statements. Now, one other thing is that we now see also more coordinated attempts, right? Coordinated efforts in popularizing and viralizing these narratives, right? So it's not just, you know, your cyber troopers, you now have your bots to help you do that too. And more, especially on TikTok, just as a lead up to the general election, but also as immediately post the general elections, what we saw is a trend of using young content creators. You know, there were also a lot of paid content, paid partnerships that we saw. It's creating, you know, there's so many different challenges to this and many contributing factors, but it's the ecosystem and the environment has really allowed for, you know, disinformation to proliferate, hate speech to escalate. You know, there's I think the biggest challenge now is how do we promote media and digital literacy? You know, how do we promote fact checking? For us, you know, we always talk about don't act, you know, basically don't react. You need the moment you get any information, you need to pause. You need to, you know, check who are your sources and then think about what you're going to do to act. Yeah. In terms of, like, you know, if you want to take it to the scale of what we saw, it was really alarming because, you know, the hate had really reached a lot of, like, using very, very hostile, dehumanizing language. There were calls for incitement, calls for violence, right? And then we had to take a step back, and especially now with this new government, new leadership, right? So we had to take a step back and think about what actions can we, you know, collectively maybe, you know, call for or, you know, really focus on. Of course, the leadership is going to do what they want to do, right? There's some level of political will, you know, it's going to continue in certain way. But I want to also address some thoughts, and I know Dr. Syaza perhaps have a slightly different point of view with regards to use of laws in really curbing harmful, dangerous, and hate speech, because it's a kind of a dilemma, right? The same set of laws that we call to be used against those you know, who are propagating these speech are basically also same set of laws that have been used to censor speech in general, right? Dina, you talked about how there is really a need for a better environment that promotes freedom of speech and so on. So one of the things that we've been thinking about, and we've been communicating this to the Ministry of Communications and Digital, is that there actually needs, there is a need for an independent commission to be set up, right? To address and acknowledge, it's not just about addressing, but really to acknowledge what are the root causes. It's not just, you know, politicians saying it. It's already become so systemic and so institutionalized that you have to interrogate our education system. We have to interrogate our policies to see where the fears are coming from. Because a lot of these hate speech, you know, especially when it comes through user-generated comments, you can see is built in fear. Yes, on one side, there's fear mongering, but they are able to hit the right target. And this commission should really kind of look at what is really contributing to this, but also think more strategically about how we can address this beyond use of laws. Of course, I have to say, extreme cases, you know, the laws will be there, you know, but we may need to rethink how we can localize the Rabat plan of action that involve multiple, you know, stakeholders will have to come together. Now, another thing is, and this is really the tough one, because we need a healthier information ecosystem. So that has to be more focused on education and less on censorship. Now, the big tech companies play a huge role, but because especially during the 15 GE, what we noted was the it was almost like a fractured, content moderation attempts by the various social media big tech companies, right? And of course, it all came in at a time when Meta was laying off thousands of people, Twitter was laying off people, TikTok was like trying to figure out, hey, how is it that from an entertainment platform, we have now moved into a platform where information is being politicized, and so on. So I think we do need to hold the social media companies to account, but it's not going to be easy, right? But at a minimum, really call for transparency, but also call for more resources to be put in place to ensure that at a minimum, right, content moderation works beyond the use of bots. You need to contextualize how you look at some of these content within Malaysians, very diverse society in terms of language, and I'm relearning my Bahasa Malaysia, for example, with all the new acronyms. Yeah. So on that note, I think we do, need to think a little bit outside the box also in addressing the way 3R has been weaponized, through harmful, dangerous, and hate speech. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wathshlah, for that insightful comments, especially in terms of providing us how are this hate speech and disinformation being manifested on social media, especially during the GE15. And I guess we have reached to the last part of our segment, which is the Q&A. So if I can welcome the participants to please drop your comments or your question in the chat box. And if you can also specify who you are addressing through the questions, that would be helpful. So just to let you know, the Q&A session will be around, we have maybe 5 to 10 minutes. So we may only have to take 2 to 3 questions max. While we are waiting for people to key in the question, if I can just share with you the survey link. So please, participants that that is joining us on Zoom, if you can scan the QR code here to provide us with the feedback for the event today. The link will also be shared in the chat box. So let me see if we have any question up. Okay, so we have one question from the floor that asks, and I think this one is rather general, but everyone can pitch in your answer. So the question is, what would you like to see an innovation to track or monitor hate speech? So we know that CIJ has something on, we have Tracker Benchy, but do you think that there are more that needs to be done, more innovation, more ways to counter this hate speech? Because in Asia, general election will be held across the region in this year and the next. And so what are the key measures as we can prepare? So maybe if I can call upon Dr. James to first give his comments.
Yeah, just a quick fire response in terms of options to address some of this hate speech and disinformation. I want to point out, and this has been said by some of the colleagues already. One, I think the technology companies have taken a hit. When you speak with them, they will say that they have less resources. They point to the fact that they're being laid off. So a lot of the fact-checking initiatives that they supported are likely not to receive that much of support moving forward. So I think we will see a thinning of fact-checking. While they have spurred such an idea, but I think how fact-checking is done and on what resources. So I think we are on the back foot there. Secondly, I think media literacy programs have to be mainstream into the government budget, mainstream into the schools and so on. The piecemeal approach is not working because in our experience in trying to roll out media literacy programs in Malaysia, without monetizing it, that means, at every level of the media literacy flow, curriculum flow, there's a demand for funds. So trainers want to be paid, attendees want to be paid, institutions who host those events want to be paid. So given that the resources out there are thin, especially those put forward by technology companies and others, I think we will have to look at how things like media literacy can be mainstream, and also we also need to sort of demonetize the idea that all trainings, attendees and everything will have to be paid. There must be really another mechanism and solutions should be found if people need support to attend such trainings.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Gomez, for answering the question and talking a bit more about how training should be given. And so if I can get anyone, either Javan or Wathshlah to provide. Javan, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I think correct me if I'm wrong, the question was on innovations, right? So it's kind of tricky on the front of tech companies because like Dr. James mentioned, we're looking at layoffs, but at the same time, we've seen a ballooning of budget on relying on AI technology. So from my experience of developing the tool, I really think there needs to be a better balance in budgeting on the side of tech companies, because we can't fully, if TikTok and G15 taught us anything, we can't fully rely on whatever algorithms that are being touted by tech companies. But at the same time, fully relying on human moderators have its costs as well. People are getting PTSD, people are getting depressed, and works like ultimately what needs to be gone from social media isn't are being made gone, and what shouldn't be there is still there. So it's really what I'm trying to say is it really has to be an act of balancing between the tech scene's focus on investing in AI and having a better team of humans to train that AI as well. Because moving forward, we're definitely seeing less reliance on fully human mechanisms, right? So for me, definitely a better balance. And on the side of initiatives like what I do with Tracker Benchy, that was a prototype. There are many initiatives out there that look at a more regional level, more global level of continuously developing what is hateful, what shouldn't be hateful, and what we can do about it. So I think even if we are talking about budget being, depleting, the work of these initiatives, third-party initiatives, should and hopefully will still go on. Yeah, that's me.
All right, thank you, Javan. I guess the point that you highlighted is important. AI is something that is vastly developing, but yet people are still figuring out how exactly to monitor and manage AI before it gets out of hand. And maybe if I can get Wathshlah to give your view with regards to this question.
Yeah, thank you. I completely agree with Javan, and also social media, these big tech companies, they play a huge role, right? Ultimately, they are profit oriented, and anything they develop with regards to AI, the way they use the algorithm is to advance further within the market. So I think the other side of it is, of course, we have this possibility, even now as we speak, right? The new Minister of Communications and Digital and his deputy has been talking about regulating social media. Regulating means, more possibilities for censorship. There has to be space for, I think, a multi-stakeholder dialogue in this place. Very often we do look at Google's transparency reports and Facebook reports, but I think we really need to challenge them on these reports, especially on, the government's content takedowns and, why, like, kind of like hold them to account. Why are they allowing themselves, to be used by the government to censor speech and so on. And I go back to the point about education, right? The nature of education in itself is also very critical. More and more we think that, we really need to penetrate at the level of primary school all the way up to university, right? Rethinking the curriculum about, what is media literacy and what is digital literacy. It's not the same as how it was for us in the 80s and 90s, right? It is about it's not just about how do you protect yourself, but how do you, we have a lot of, information out there. How do you leverage this? But less so on how do you protect yourself and how do you become responsible users? How do you make sure that you don't just forward everything? So education is going to be very critical. We are starting to have discussions with some public universities as well to kind of figure out how a more comprehensive curriculum could be introduced to some of the modules that are available as well. Yeah. So on that note, I think there's so many different ways we need to look at it and look at it all in parallel, as there's no one answer that's going to be able to respond to this challenge.
All right, thank you very much, Wathshlah, for your insights. Yes, education, especially rethinking about how we present media literacy on all the different levels of society, right? And with that, I have another question that I think Dina, both Dina and Dr. Syaza can address. The question is, do you think the quality of free speech, especially internet freedom, is heading positively than before the Reformasi era in 2018? It is especially notable that Anwar won the last election because of this. So maybe I can call Dina. Would you like to respond first?
Okay. Basically, the question is whether the content is more positive.
Whether, yes, free speech is heading towards a more positive, I would say, direction.
I know that all of us keep focusing on the, this horrible, hateful videos that you see, TikTok, Instagram, and all. But I really like to see, and I've seen this, that there are many young Malaysians who are actually changing the narrative. So I follow these people on TikTok and on Instagram. Okay, one is Dr. Iman, the vet, who talks and educates people about keeping dogs, taking care of dogs, and how you can take, that's one. There's another guy, I keep forgetting his name. His icon is Datuk Sri Vida, so he sells all these whitening creams, but he also educates people about dogs. He actually, feeds stray dogs. He loves dogs. So he wears to them and all. There's a lot more on TikTok. And there's another girl, again, I'm old now, I can't remember names, who uses makeup to talk about, oppression, feminism, how her mom drives her nuts. But a lot of young people are actually listening to her because they identify with that. And I think that there is a lot of that. It's just that we have to be rajin, and layan TikTok or Instagram. That's one. Another one, which honestly, if I had the money, I would want to actually work with these young men and women. The book reviewers that I meet on Instagram, I can't stop talking about them enough. They become friends. There's one book, Buku Ruby, then her best friend, the fussy reader of Lilies and Peaches or something. And they talk about books. And they talk about books, not in a very academic manner, but even though they have basically, assessed the book, critiqued the book in a very academic way. But a lot of readers are going there and they're all Malaysians. They're not necessarily all Malays, because they love books and they like the discussion and they have all these reels or apa benda, Instagram live, right, to discuss books. So they wear the towel lah, macam-macam lah on the head, And I think that there is a lot of room for there's a lot of potential. It's just a matter of us engaging with these people and say, hey, I like your work. Can we do something and multiply this kind of good work and discussion so that everyone listens to it? That's it for now.
All right, thank you so much, Dina, for introducing us, this fellow TikTokers. Hopefully, some of you might have catch up the names and check them out. Maybe we get Dr. Syaza to give your views. Dr. Syaza, is free speech going towards a positive direction?
Okay, quickly, I agree with that statement fully, 100%. I know the question asked if it's better now compared to the reformasi period. In my various other engagements, I've pointed out to students and others that, look, the freedom of speech in Malaysia now is not just better than 1998, it's better than 1988, it's better than 2008. So we are actually at a much better place in terms of freedom of speech. Sometimes when I talk about this with students, they're surprised because they were not there, right? They were not born yet 20 years back. But I think we are definitely moving in the right direction in providing space for people to be creative, to say whatever they want, to criticize the government. My students, believe it or not, when I told them stories about the 80s and 90s, they couldn't believe me. They were like, are you sure, madam, that this happened, that people were just thrown in jail for saying things? I was like, yeah, be thankful that you were born in this era. So that's my quick answer to that. We are in a much better position. And if I may add, I truly agree with Wathshlah that in other platforms that I've spoken and even in my various writings, I truly agree that the law is not our first go-to when it comes to speech, right? I truly agree that once we go down that road, it becomes very slippery because using the law to censor speech is addictive, right? And unfortunately, we can't trust this government or any government to use the law when it comes to limiting what people can say online or offline. Education is definitely key because we have this open space, just like Dina says, it's now about engaging them and teaching them critical thinking. You have all of this information. What do you do with this information? I think that is what we should focus on. Why I mentioned the law because I was so worried looking at some of these things that are happening around us. Inciting violence is my worst fear. But other than that, the law is our last option. Yeah, education, teaching people what to do with this massive amount of information, which for me is a good thing because it shows that we have this open space to have discourse and debate. So that's my answer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Syaza, for reminding us that if we give more option, more free will for the younger generation, but equip them with the right tools, right? Hopefully the future has more positive outlook. And so we have come to the end of the program. Thank you so much, all of the discussants, and also the participants for listening and also for providing us with the question. Now, before we close the session, let me call upon Miss Emily Long. So this event is launched in partnership with Connexus. She is the Connexus representative. She's also the program officer for Search for Common Ground. So if I can call upon Miss Emily to deliver the closing speech.
Thank you so much, and apologies all for joining this late, but I just wanted to take a moment to share about Connexus and the Asia Ref Award, which is an associate award under a USAID funded project. And essentially the Asia Ref is Asia Religious and Ethnic Freedom. It's a project where we work with local partners to expand freedom of religion and conscience in the Asia region, and we are working with the Asia Center as they are serving as, we're working with them as a knowledge partner. We're very grateful to be working with the Asia Center as a knowledge partner on our C4 project, or our Southeast Asian and Freedom of Religion and Belief project. And we just wanted to give an opportunity to share about the project. And if you have any ideas for project research or partner information, we have a page where you can contact us and let us know if you're interested in getting involved with the project in any way on Connexus. So thank you so much for the time at the end. Sorry again for being late, but really appreciate it.
No problem, Miss Emily. And so we have come to the end. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It has been a meaningful evening spent, and we hope that the sharing has been beneficial for everyone. So before we end, please, I would like to remind everyone again to scan the QR code to provide a feedback for us so that we can improve on how we run our events. And with that, I will now close the session. Thank you so much, everyone. We hope to see you in our future event. Please follow us on our social media accounts to get more updates from us. And with that, goodbye and good night to everyone. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.